The whistle of an approaching train echoed through the Montana wilderness, as Theodora Bennett struggled against the rough ropes binding her wrists and ankles to the cold metal rails. Tears streamed down her face, the afternoon sun beating mercilessly upon her as she desperately twisted her head, searching for any sign of help in the vast emptiness of the rugged landscape. It was the summer of 1876, and Theodora had never imagined her journey west would lead to such peril. At 22, she had left behind her comfortable life in Boston, seeking adventure and purpose as a schoolteacher in the growing town of Silver Creek. Her chestnut hair, usually neatly pinned, now spilled across the gravel, and her emerald dress was torn and soiled from her struggles against the 3 masked men who had ambushed her stagecoach, killed the driver, and brought her to this desolate stretch of the Northern Pacific Railroad. "Help!" She screamed, her voice hoarse from hours of calling out. "Somebody, please!" The train's whistle blew again, closer this time, and Theodora could feel the rails beginning to vibrate beneath her. Panic seized her chest as she realized death was approaching with the speed and force of modern industry. She closed her eyes, tears flowing freely, resigning herself to her fate. Then came the sound of pounding hooves. Xander Kane urged his stallion forward at breakneck speed, his keen eyes fixed on the distant figure bound to the tracks. He had been tracking a gang of outlaws for 3 days after they'd robbed the bank in Silver Creek, killing 2 men in the process. The trail had led him to this remote stretch of railway, where he'd spotted something unusual through his spyglass, something that made his blood run cold. "Faster, Thunder," he commanded, leaning low over his horse's neck, his black Stetson secured tightly on his head. At 28, Xander had spent the last 6 years as a cowboy turned bounty hunter, with a reputation for bringing in the West's most notorious criminals. His weathered face, perpetually tanned from life outdoors, was set in grim determination as he raced against time. The train was visible now, a black iron beast belching smoke as it rounded the distant bend. Xander estimated he had less than 2 minutes before it reached the woman. He drew his knife as Thunder galloped the final stretch. Leaping from his horse before it had fully stopped, Xander landed beside Theodora with a thud, immediately dropping to his knees. "Hold still, madam," he instructed, his voice deep and steady despite the urgency of the situation. His knife flashed in the sunlight as he sliced through the ropes binding her right wrist. "Please hurry," Theodora begged, the train's rumble growing louder by the second. "It's coming." Xander worked with practiced precision, cutting through the ropes on her left wrist, then moving swiftly to her ankles. The ground trembled beneath them, the train's whistle shrieking as the engineer spotted them and frantically applied the brakes, a futile gesture given the momentum of the massive locomotive. With the final rope severed, Xander wrapped his strong arms around Theodora's waist and rolled them both off the tracks, tumbling down the gravel embankment. They landed with Theodora pressed against his chest, his body shielding hers as the train thundered past, missing them by mere feet. The ground shook violently, and the rush of air tore at their clothes and hair as the iron beast roared by. For several moments after the train passed, they remained frozen in place, hearts pounding in unison. Theodora became acutely aware of the strong arms still wrapped protectively around her, the steady rise and fall of the stranger's chest against her back, the scent of leather, horse, and something distinctly masculine filling her senses. "Are you hurt, madam?" Xander asked, finally loosening his grip and helping her sit up. Theodora turned to face her rescuer, taking in the sight of him for the first time. His eyes were a striking shade of blue, set in a face that bore the marks of a life lived outdoors, a small scar across his left cheekbone, skin tanned and weathered, dark hair falling in waves beneath his hat. There was kindness in those eyes, despite the hardness of his overall appearance. I don't think so," she managed, her voice trembling. "Thank you, you saved my life." Xander nodded, rising to his feet and offering her his hand. Xander Kane at your service. Theodora Bennett, she replied, accepting his help and wobbling slightly as she stood. I was on the stagecoach to Silver Creek when we were attacked. Xander's expression darkened. The Pharaoh gang, I've been tracking them since they hit the bank in town. He glanced back at the railway. This is new, even for them. Usually they're just after money. Theodora brushed dirt from her torn dress, trying to restore some semblance of dignity. They seemed to think I was someone else. They kept calling me Carson's woman and demanding to know where something was hidden. Carson? Elliot Carson? Xander asked sharply. I don't know. They didn't use a first name. Xander whistled for Thunder, who trotted obediently to his side. Miss Bennett, Silver Creek isn't safe for you right now. I have a cabin about an hour's ride from here. You can rest there while I figure out what's going on. Theodora hesitated, weighing her limited options. Return to town where the men who tried to kill her might still be lurking, or trust this stranger who had just saved her life. I don't have much choice, do I? She said finally, smoothing back her tangled hair. I'm afraid not, Xander replied, his expression softening. But you have my word as a gentleman that you'll be safe with me. He helped her mount Thunder, then swung up behind her. Theodora stiffened at the proximity, unaccustomed to such closeness with a man, but the security of his presence was undeniable. Hold on, Xander instructed, reaching around her to take the reins. As they rode away from the tracks, Theodora glanced back at the spot where she'd nearly met her end. Something told her that her life had just changed irrevocably, and not just because of her brush with death. Xander's cabin nestled in a grove of pines at the base of a mountain, the structure sturdy and well-maintained despite its remote location. A small creek bubbled nearby, and a corral housed another horse that nickered a greeting as they approached. It's not much, Xander said as he helped Theodora dismount, but it's secure. The interior was simple but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A sturdy table and chairs occupied the center of the main room, and a curtained-off area presumably concealed a bed. Rifles hung on racks, and various tools of a bounty hunter's trade were organized neatly throughout. Please sit, Xander gestured to a chair as he stoked the dying embers in the fireplace. You must be exhausted. Theodora sank gratefully into the offered seat, her body suddenly acknowledging every bruise and ache. I still can't believe this is happening, she murmured, more to herself than to her host. Xander put a kettle on to boil. Miss Bennett, I need to know everything about your journey here. Every detail might help me understand why the Pharaoh gang targeted you specifically. Theodora recounted her story, how she'd answered an advertisement for a schoolteacher in Silver Creek, leaving behind her parents' home in Boston after their passing had left her alone in the world. She described the stagecoach journey and the attack in vivid detail, remembering every word the masked men had spoken. They kept saying I was hiding something, she concluded, but I've never met anyone named Carson in my life. Xander passed her a steaming cup of coffee. Elliot Carson was a prospector who struck it rich about 6 months ago. Word is he found a gold vein that could rival the Comstock lode. He disappeared 3 weeks ago, presumably with a map to his claim. And these men think I know where this map is? Theodora asked incredulously. Carson was rumored to have a sweetheart back east. Maybe there's a resemblance. Xander studied her face. You certainly don't look like an ordinary schoolteacher. Theodora felt her cheeks warm at his scrutiny. I assure you, Mr. Kane, I am exactly what I claim to be. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. I believe you, Miss Bennett, but the Pharaoh gang clearly doesn't, and they're not known for giving up easily. What do we do now? I need to get back to town, find out what's really going on. You'll stay here where it's safe. Theodora straightened in her chair. I most certainly will not. I came west to be independent, not to hide away while someone else solves my problems. Xander's eyebrows rose. These men tried to kill you once already. And they failed thanks to you, she countered. But I refuse to cower in fear. Besides, if I'm to be mistaken for this Carson woman, perhaps I can be useful. They argued for several minutes before Xander grudgingly conceded that having her in town might indeed draw out the gang. But he insisted on proper precautions and made it clear she would follow his instructions without question. "Fine," Theodora agreed, "but I'm not some delicate flower to be protected. I came west knowing the dangers." "Knowing about danger and facing it are two different things," Xander remarked, but there was a hint of admiration in his voice. That night, Theodora slept in Xander's bed, the curtain drawn for privacy while he kept watch by the fire. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully, her mind replaying the terrifying moments on the tracks and the miraculous rescue that followed. In the quiet darkness, she found herself acutely aware of Xander's presence beyond the curtain, this mysterious man who had saved her life and now promised to protect her from further harm. Morning brought a new challenge when Theodora realized the state of her clothing. Her dress was torn beyond decent wear, and she had nothing else. "I might have a solution," Xander said, rummaging in a trunk and producing a faded blue shirt and a pair of trousers that had clearly been mended multiple times. "They'll be too big, but with some adjustments." Theodora accepted the clothing with mixed feelings. A proper Boston lady would never consider wearing men's attire, but practicality won out over propriety. "Turn around," she instructed, and Xander obliged, facing the wall while she changed behind the curtain. The pants required rolling up several times at the cuffs and cinching tightly at the waist, while the shirt enveloped her like a tent. She emerged feeling both ridiculous and strangely liberated. Xander turned and froze, his expression unreadable as he took in the sight of her. After a moment, he cleared his throat. "We'll need to get you proper clothes in town." "These will do for now," Theodora replied, experimentally testing her range of movement in the unfamiliar garments. "At least I can ride more comfortably." They set out for Silver Creek after breakfast, Theodora riding the mare from Xander's corral, a gentle chestnut named Penny. As they traveled, Xander explained more about the Faro gang and their recent activities in the territory. They're led by twins, Samuel and Seth Faro. Until recently, they mostly stuck to robbing stagecoaches and the occasional small-town bank. But lately, they've become more violent, more desperate. "You've been hunting them for some time?" Theodora asked. Xander nodded, his expression grim. 2 years. "They killed a friend of mine, a sheriff in Wyoming territory, who got too close to catching them." "I'm sorry," Theodora said softly, sensing the personal nature of his quest. "It's the way of things out here," Xander replied, but his rigid posture told her the wound was still fresh. They reached Silver Creek by mid-afternoon, the small mining town bustling with activity. Wooden buildings lined the muddy main street, and horses were hitched outside the saloon and general store. Theodora drew curious glances in her borrowed men's clothing, but Xander's intimidating presence beside her discouraged any comments. Their first stop was the sheriff's office, where they found a harried-looking man with a silver-streaked mustache poring over wanted posters. "Sheriff Tucker," Xander greeted him, removing his hat as they entered. The sheriff looked up, his expression brightening. "Kane, didn't expect to see you back so soon." His gaze shifted to Theodora. "And who might this be?" "Theodora Bennett," she introduced herself, extending her hand. "I was meant to be the new schoolteacher." Sheriff Tucker's eyes widened in recognition. "Miss Bennett, we feared the worst when the stagecoach driver was found dead. What happened?" Theodora recounted her ordeal while the sheriff listened with growing concern, occasionally exchanging glances with Xander. "The Faro gang, without a doubt," Tucker confirmed when she finished. "But this business about Carson, that's troubling." "Has there been any sign of Carson since his disappearance?" Xander asked. Tucker shook his head. "Nothing. Some folks think he took his secret to the grave, others believe he's hiding out, waiting for the right moment to claim his strike officially." "And his sweetheart," Theodora pressed. "The woman they mistook me for, Lillian Porter," Tucker supplied. "She arrived about a month before Carson vanished. Pretty woman, kept to herself mostly. She disappeared the same day as Carson." Xander frowned. Together or separately, no one knows, but there's something else you should know. Tucker lowered his voice. The pharaohs aren't the only ones looking for Carson's gold. The mining companies got men searching too, and they don't ask nicely. Theodora and Xander exchanged glances. The situation was more complicated than they'd realized. Miss Bennett needs proper accommodations, Xander said. Is Mrs. Holloway still running her boarding house? She is, but I wouldn't recommend it, Tucker replied. Too public, too easy for someone to get to her. Better she stays somewhere less obvious. She can stay with me at the hotel, Xander decided. I'll take the adjoining room and keep watch. Theodora opened her mouth to protest such an arrangement but quickly realized the practicality of it. Still, the idea of staying in such close proximity to Xander sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach. After purchasing proper clothing for Theodora, a practical riding skirt, several shirtwaists, and a sturdy pair of boots, they checked into the Silver Dollar Hotel. The establishment was modest but clean, and the proprietor asked no questions when Xander requested adjoining rooms with a connecting door. I need to make some inquiries around town, Xander told Theodora once they were settled. Stay here, keep the door locked, and don't open it for anyone but me. How long will you be gone? She asked, suddenly reluctant to be left alone. A few hours at most. I'll bring back supper. He hesitated, then added, if I'm not back by nightfall, there's a loaded pistol in my saddlebag. Do you know how to use it? Theodora shook her head. Xander retrieved the weapon and gave her a quick lesson in its operation. Point and squeeze the trigger, he concluded, but only if your life depends on it. The weight of the gun in her hands felt foreign and frightening, but Theodora set her jaw and nodded. Be careful, Mr. Kane. A hint of a smile touched his lips. I think after all we've been through, you might call me Xander. Then you must call me Theodora, she replied, returning his smile after he left. Theodora took the opportunity to bathe and change into her new clothes, grateful to feel civilized again. The riding skirt was far more practical than the fashionable dresses she'd worn in Boston, allowing her freedom of movement while maintaining a degree of propriety. She was brushing her hair when a knock came at the door. Freezing mid-stroke, she called out, "Who is it?" "It's Xander," came the reply, and she relaxed, setting aside the brush to unlock the door. But when she opened it, it wasn't Xander who stood in the hallway, but a burly man with a scar splitting his left eyebrow. Before she could scream, he clamped a hand over her mouth and forced her back into the room. Not a sound, Carson's woman, he growled, kicking the door shut behind him. We're going to have a little talk about that map. Theodora struggled against his grip, her heart racing with terror. The pistol Xander had left her was in the bedside drawer, just a few feet away, but might as well have been miles. I don't know anything about a map, she gasped when he momentarily loosened his hold. I'm not who you think I am, the man sneered. Save it, Seth saw you with Kane. Figured you'd lead us to the gold eventually, but now we're running out of patience. Theodora's mind raced. This man thought she was working with Xander to find Carson's gold. Perhaps she could use that misconception to her advantage. Kane doesn't have the map, she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. He's looking for it, same as you. The man studied her face, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Then where is it? I don't know. That's why we came to town to find leads. For a moment, he seemed to believe her, his grip loosening slightly. Theodora seized the opportunity, driving her knee upward with all her strength. The man howled in pain, doubling over, and she lunged for the bedside drawer. Her fingers had just closed around the pistol when he recovered, grabbing her from behind and throwing her across the room. The gun skittered under the bed as she crashed into the washstand. You'll regret that, he snarled, advancing on her. The door burst open with a splintering crack, and Xander stood framed in the doorway, his own pistol drawn and aimed at the intruder's head. Step away from her, he commanded, his voice deadly calm. The man froze, then slowly raised his hands. Kane, fancy meeting you here. Harley Farrow, Xander acknowledged. Still doing your cousin's dirty work, I see. Sheriff Tucker appeared behind Xander, his own weapon drawn. "We've been looking for you, Harley. You're under arrest for the murder of that stagecoach driver." Theodora sagged against the wall in relief as Tucker handcuffed Harley and led him away. Xander immediately crossed to her side, his expression tight with concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands gently examining her for injuries. "Just shaken," she assured him, though she winced when his fingers brushed a forming bruise on her shoulder. Xander's jaw clenched. "I shouldn't have left you alone." "You couldn't have known they'd find me so quickly," Theodora argued. "Besides, I handled myself rather well until you arrived, don't you think?" A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. "You did at that. Not many women would keep their wits about them in such a situation." "I'm discovering I'm made of sterner stuff than I realized," she replied, surprised to find it was true. The sheltered Boston girl she'd been just days ago seemed a lifetime away. That night, Xander insisted on keeping the connecting door between their rooms open. Theodora didn't object, finding comfort in the knowledge that he was just a few steps away. As she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she found herself reflecting on the strange turn her life had taken and on the enigmatic man who had become her protector. "Xander," she called softly. "Are you awake?" "Yes," came his immediate response. "May I ask you something personal?" A pause then. "Go ahead." "What made you become a bounty hunter?" The silence stretched so long that Theodora thought he might not answer. Finally, his voice came through the darkness, weighted with memory. "I was a rancher once, had a small spread in Colorado territory, a good life, simple but honest." His tone shifted, hardening. "Then the Faro gang came through. They killed my wife, Elizabeth, while I was in town getting supplies, burned everything to the ground." Theodora's heart constricted. "I'm so sorry." "It was 7 years ago now," Xander continued. "I tracked them for months before I realized I had a knack for hunting criminals, started taking bounties to fund my search, brought in dozens of outlaws, but the Pharaohs always managed to stay one step ahead." "Until now," Theodora said softly. "Until now," he agreed. "With Harley in custody, Samuel and Seth won't be far. They don't abandon their own." Theodora hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at her. "When it's over, when you've caught them all, what then?" The silence returned, longer this time. "I don't know," Xander finally admitted. "Never thought that far ahead." Morning brought news that Harley Faro had escaped during the night, overpowering the deputy on duty. Xander cursed when Sheriff Tucker delivered the news, his hand instinctively moving to rest on Theodora's shoulder. "They'll be coming for you again," he told her grimly. "Both for revenge and because they still think you're their key to Carson's gold." "Then we use that," Theodora suggested, an idea forming. "We let them think I'll lead them to the map." Xander shook his head. "Too dangerous." "It's our best chance to draw them out," she insisted. "I'll be careful and you'll be watching over me." Their debate was interrupted by a young boy rushing into the sheriff's office, out of breath and wide-eyed. "Sheriff, they found a body up in Rattlesnake Canyon. It's Mr. Carson." The discovery of Elliot Carson's remains changed everything. The prospector had been shot in the back, his body hidden in a shallow grave that recent rains had partially uncovered. More importantly, a torn piece of paper was found clutched in his hand, a fragment of the map to his claim. "This changes things," Tucker said, examining the scrap of paper. "The Pharaohs will be desperate now. They know the map exists, but this piece alone isn't enough to locate the gold." "Where's the rest of it?" Xander wondered aloud. Theodora studied the fragment, noticing something peculiar about the handwriting. "These markings look familiar," she murmured. "Almost like a form of shorthand we used at my finishing school." Both men turned to her in surprise. "You can read it?" Tucker asked. "Not entirely, but some of these symbols." Theodora squinted at the paper. "This indicates water and this one means danger or beware." "If the rest of the map uses the same system, then only someone educated at that same school could read it properly," Xander concluded. "Which means—" "Lillian Porter," Theodora finished. "She must have been from a similar background as me." Further investigation revealed that Lillian had indeed attended the same Boston finishing school as Theodora, though several years earlier. The coincidence was too great to ignore. The pharaohs must have realized this connection, Tucker mused. That's why they targeted you specifically, Miss Bennett. Your background matched Lillian's. But how would they know about the shorthand? Theodora wondered. They wouldn't, Xander said slowly, unless they already have the rest of the map, Tucker finished. And they need someone who can read it. The realization brought a chill to Theodora's spine. They're not going to stop coming after me, are they? Xander's expression was grim as he shook his head. Not until they have what they want or they're behind bars. Their plan was dangerous but simple. Word would be spread that Theodora had found something among her belongings, a letter from Lillian Porter containing vital information about the map. She would make a show of leaving town alone, heading toward Rattlesnake Canyon, where Carson's body had been found. I don't like using you as bait, Xander said as they prepared, checking and rechecking his weapons. Neither do I, Theodora admitted, but I trust you to keep me safe. The words were spoken with a certainty that surprised even her. Xander paused in his preparations, his blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. I won't let anything happen to you, he promised, his voice low and fervent. Not while I draw breath. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Theodora found herself acutely aware of his proximity, of the way his hand rested just inches from hers on the table. Sheriff Tucker's entrance broke the spell. Everything's set, he announced. Word spreading through town as we speak. The following morning, Theodora rode out of Silver Creek alone, her heart pounding despite her outward show of confidence. Xander and Tucker, along with 3 deputies, had left hours earlier, positioning themselves along her route. She was never truly alone, but the knowledge did little to calm her nerves as she guided Penny along the trail toward the canyon. 2 hours into her journey, Theodora sensed she was being followed. Resisting the urge to look back, she continued at a steady pace, remembering Xander's instructions to act natural. The narrow trail wound through scrubby pines, occasionally offering glimpses of the rugged landscape stretching to the horizon. She had just rounded a bend when 3 riders appeared ahead, blocking her path. Samuel and Seth Farrow were instantly recognizable from the wanted posters, identical twins with matching red beards and cold eyes. Harley stood slightly behind them, a purple bruise marring his jaw where Xander had struck him during his recapture. Miss Porter, Samuel greeted her, using the name they believed was hers. Or should I say, Miss Bennett, so kind of you to save us the trouble of coming for you. Theodora straightened in her saddle, channeling every ounce of courage she possessed. I know what you want. Do you now? Seth sneered. And are you going to give it to us willingly, or do we need to persuade you? I have a proposition, Theodora replied, her voice remarkably steady. I can read the map, all of it, including the parts written in code. Help me find the gold and I'll split it with you. The brothers exchanged glances. What makes you think we need your help? Samuel asked. Because you've had the map for weeks and still haven't found the gold, Theodora countered. Carson was clever. He knew his claim would be targeted, so he protected it with a code only a select few could decipher. Her gamble paid off. Uncertainty flickered across their faces. Show us, Seth demanded, producing a folded piece of paper from inside his vest. Theodora extended her hand. Let me see it. Seth hesitated, then nudged his horse forward, holding out the paper. As Theodora reached for it, a shot rang out and Seth's hat flew from his head. That's far enough, Xander's voice called from the trees. The next one won't miss. Chaos erupted. The Farrow brothers drew their weapons, firing blindly toward Xander's position as Harley lunged for Theodora. She kicked Penny into motion, narrowly avoiding his grasp as more shots erupted from multiple directions, Tucker and his deputies joining the fray. In the confusion, Theodora lost control of Penny, who reared in panic. She felt herself sliding from the saddle, then impact with the hard ground knocked the breath from her lungs. Dazed, she looked up to see Samuel Farrow standing over her, his gun aimed at her heart. "You set us up," he snarled. Before he could pull the trigger, a blur of motion knocked him sideways, Xander, tackling him to the ground. They grappled in the dust, fighting for control of the weapon. Theodora scrambled to her feet, searching desperately for something to use as a weapon. A single shot echoed through the canyon. Theodora froze, her heart stopping as both men went still. Then Xander rose slowly, blood staining his shirt but not his own. Samuel Farrow lay motionless on the ground around them. The gunfire had ceased. Seth and Harley Farrow were in custody, disarmed and being bound by Tucker and his deputies. "Are you hurt?" Xander asked, crossing to Theodora, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "No," she managed, though her voice shook. "I'm fine." He reached out, brushing dust from her cheek with a gentleness that belied the violence of moments before. Tucker approached, holding the map retrieved from Seth. "It's over," he said simply. "The Farrow gang won't trouble anyone again." The ride back to Silver Creek was quiet, the adrenaline of the confrontation giving way to exhaustion. Theodora found herself riding close to Xander, drawing comfort from his steady presence. "What happens now?" she asked as the town came into view. Xander was silent for a long moment. "I've been chasing the Farrows for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to do anything else." "You could stay," Theodora suggested, her heart quickening at her own boldness. "Silver Creek still needs a schoolteacher, but I imagine they could use a man of your talents as well." He glanced at her, surprise and something warmer in his eyes. "And would that arrangement suit you, Miss Bennett?" "Very much so, Mr. Kane," she replied softly. That evening they sat on the hotel's veranda, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. The events of the past days seemed almost dreamlike in the peaceful quiet. "I received a telegram today," Xander said, breaking a comfortable silence. "There's a reward for the Farrows, a substantial one." "That's wonderful," Theodora smiled. "You've earned it." "I was thinking," he continued, a new hesitancy in his voice, "that it might be enough to buy a small ranch. Nothing fancy, but good land with room to grow." Theodora's heart skipped a beat. "That sounds like a fine plan." Xander turned to face her fully, taking her hand in his. "It wouldn't be much of a life for a Boston-educated lady." "I didn't come west for luxury," she reminded him. "I came for adventure, for purpose." She paused, gathering her courage, "for a chance at a different kind of happiness." "Theodora," Xander said her name like a prayer, "when I saw you on those tracks, I thought I was just saving another innocent. I never imagined you'd end up saving me too." "Saving you?" she echoed, confused, from the emptiness, from a life with no purpose beyond revenge. His thumb traced circles on her palm. "You've given me a reason to think about tomorrow again." Under the deepening twilight, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers, a kiss as gentle as it was profound. Theodora responded without hesitation, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingers. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Xander smiled, a true smile that reached his eyes and erased years of hardship from his face. "I think I'm going to like Silver Creek," he murmured. "As will I," Theodora replied, "as long as you're here." 1 year later, Theodora stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching as Xander worked with a young colt in the corral. The small but thriving property stretched out before her, a testament to their hard work and shared vision. She still taught at the Silver Creek School 3 days a week, finding fulfillment in shaping young minds. Xander had taken on the role of deputy sheriff, his experience and tracking skills proving invaluable to the growing community. Their wedding, 6 months prior, had been a simple affair attended by the entire town. Sheriff Tucker had given the bride away, and Mrs. Holloway from the boarding house had baked a cake that became the talk of the territory. Theodora smiled, one hand absently touching the locket at her throat, Xander's wedding gift to her, containing a tiny fragment of the rope he'd cut to free her from the railroad tracks. To remember how our story began, he'd said when he presented it to her. As if sensing her thoughts, Xander looked up from his work, raising a hand in greeting. Theodora waved back, her heart swelling with love for this man who had saved her life in more ways than one. The train whistle sounded in the distance, the same train that had nearly ended her life, now regularly carried letters from her students to pen pals in the East, along with shipments of supplies for their ranch. What had once represented terror now symbolized connection and possibility. Xander released the colt and walked toward the house, removing his hat as he climbed the porch steps. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Kane?" he asked, wrapping an arm around her waist. "I was just thinking about how differently things might have turned out," Theodora replied, leaning into his embrace. "If you'd been a minute later that day on the tracks. But I wasn't," he reminded her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Some things are meant to be, Theodora. You and me, we were written in the stars long before we ever met." As the sun set on another day in their shared life, Theodora knew with absolute certainty that he was right. Their beginning may have been born of danger and desperation, but their love had grown into something enduring and true, as vast and promising as the western horizon that stretched before them.